Welcome to Truest Blood, the official True Blood podcast.
I'm Kristin Bauer.
And I'm Deborah Ann Wool.
And you've been invited in.
I wanna do bad things with you. On Truest Blood.
Welcome back to Truest Blood, where we sink our fangs into the series bite by bite.
So this marks the beginning of our final season of the podcast. And we will be picking apart all of season 7, the last season of the show. And interestingly, one of the most polarizing.
Yep.
Our guests and we ourselves have a lot of differing opinions on this one. So stay tuned for that tea.
And we are kicking off the last season of the podcast with a very, very important guest.
Yeah.
Brian Buckner joins us to talk about his journey from the writer's room, starting all the way back in season 1, to show running the series for seasons 6 and 7.
I mean, that must be just such a trip to go take over this enormous show at the end. The pressure of that.
Yes.
But, you know, Bucky's funny and smart and talented. So, you know, we were lucky to have him.
So lovely. We love Bucky.
But first, we have to remind ourselves of all the shark jumping fun that was season 7. So let's have a quick bite. Season 7 recap.
Here we go. Safer in pairs.
We're mid-melee. The Hep V vamps are all over our heroes at Belfleurs. Snatched in the fight are Jane Boathouse, Arlene, Holly, Deputy Kevin, and a pregnant Nicole.
No.
A whistle causes the vamps to disperse, but a human cry pierces the silence. Letty Mae weeps, surrounded by the bloody remains of Tara.
Arguments break out about the validity of vampire-human relations, and many storm off. But Mayor Sam convinces the rest of the vampires and humans to pair off for food and protection.
Good boy, Sam. Good boy.
However, a devastated Sookie hears only the hateful things being thought about her, including Alcide. And distraught by the loss of her best friend, she goes home alone.
Willa heads home with Reverend Daniels and a grieving and hallucinating Letty Mae, who claims she can see Tara's spirit, but only while high on V. She intentionally burns herself to trick Willa into giving her blood and sees Tara again. When the Reverend finds out, he gently asks Willa to leave.
Poor Willa. Jason and Violet are living together, although he's not happy with how she treats him. Yeah. James escorts Lafayette to his home where they bond over shared medicinal interests and the disconnect they feel in their lives. Lafayette over the loss of his cousin and James over Jessica's distance. Jessica vows to protect Adeline, and when the Vigilantes lock up Adeline and Wade in the police department, Jessica helps Andy find her.
Which makes him feel so much better about her killing 3 of his kids.
Well, they were young.
Andy and Bill form an uneasy alliance and go in search of Holly and the other hostages. Instead, they're confronted with a band of human vigilantes.
No!
Andy saves Bill's life, but the vigilantes are only getting started. They round up the other angry citizens and plan to exterminate all Supes, even discovering Mayor Merlotte's secret identity as a shifter.
Dun, dun.
They recruit Kenya and Rosie and steal guns from the police station and head out to hunt them down.
The Sookie Squad, or at least members that can walk in the sun, take a little trip to the neighboring town of St. Alice and find it destroyed by H-vamps and hate. Amazingly, a diary from a woman just like Sookie,
Imagine that.
and a pit full of dead bodies confirms their destiny, but Sookie will not let Bon Tom suffer the same fate.
Into the woods.
Sookie sneaks out while Alcide is in the shower to ask her ex-fiancé Bill to help her lure some H-vamps to kidnap her so they can track them back to the nest.
Great plan, Sook.
They head into the woods, followed soon by a team of Andy, Jessica, Jason, and Violet on a mission to stop the Vigilantes, who have also gone into the woods in search of Supes to kill.
Meanwhile, the poor folks snatched at Belfleurs are chained up in the basement of Fantasia. Kevin is brutally devoured while the others look on. Arlene manages to convince one of the vamps to release them, but she's too late when the woman dissolves while feeding on her, well, crotch before she can set them free. Holly tries her Wicca magic, but instead is targeted by their captors, glamored, and they bring her along for their hunt, and you guessed it, the woods.
Into the woods. Sam and Alcide have tracked Sookie into the woods, and everyone meets up for a battle among the trees. Violet kills Maxine when she shoots Jessica, a vigilante shoots Alcide, and the rest of the Sookie squad take down or scare off the remaining H-vamps and vigilantes, leaving Sookie covered in infected vamp blood and weeping over yet another death, Alcide's.
Vampire Underground.
Meanwhile, Pam has been off searching the world for Eric, finally catching up with him in France, where they spent some blissful time back in the 80s, until the Yakuza...
The Yakuza?
Uh-huh. They are behind the up-and-coming True Blood.
They are?
They threaten to kill Pam, forcing her and Eric to live in Shreveport and mind a local video store so they can be under the watch of the authority. They hire a young and innocent Ginger who is quickly reduced to be their pet, but not before giving Pam the idea for Fantasia, which she doesn't hesitate to steal.
Back in the current day, Pam is devastated to see that Eric has contracted Hep V.
Oh, no!
And is not inclined to return to Shreveport until she informs him that Sarah Newlin is alive and at large. Revenge gets him up and on the way back to Louisiana.
Sookie uses her fairy skills to reverse Holly's glamour, and they learn the hostages are at Fantasia. They plan a rescue, gathering all the vamps and soups they can, including the newly returned Pam and Eric. Using the secret underground railroad tunnels under Fantasia.
There are tunnels under Fantasia?
Yes, and they infiltrate the bar just in time to save the remaining hostages, including a near-death Arlene, who is healed by the handsome vampire Keith. Vigilantes, H-vamps, and the Sookie squad clash in the parking lot while our heroes ultimately are successful. Recovery.
Sookie goes home and sleeps for nearly a full day. When she wakes, Lafayette is planning a party to celebrate the people they loved and lost. She reluctantly lets it happen. As the threat of death is lifted, people connect and share stories. Andy proposes to Holly, who says yes. James and Lafayette express their romantic feelings for each other physically in Jessica's car, which pushes Jessica into the arms of Jason yet again. But neither of them know that a jealous Violet overheard their lovemaking.
Letty Mae drugs Reverend Daniels so she can go to the party and get more V. She stabs Willa, prompting Nicole to demand she and Sam leave Crazy Town, Bon Tom, for the safer Chicago. Lafayette takes Letty Mae home, convinced she is indeed crazy. But James thinks there might be something to her story and lets Lafayette and Letty Mae drink his blood. They follow Ghost Tara, who leads them to her childhood home and shows visions of her 7th birthday, revealing that she buried her father's gun in the yard, possibly saving their lives. He then walked out on them forever, leaving Letty Mae to fall into her addictions. Tara and her mother embrace and find closure.
But there's no such luck for Bill, who goes home to discover black veins on his chest.
No.
He has Hep V, and it is progressing too fast. He has flashbacks to his human life and all he fought for and all he lost. He goes to a lawyer to get his affairs in order, so get ready for some riveting estate planning. But she tries to extort him, so he kills her and stakes her bodyguard with her own pencil. Whoa. Meanwhile, Jessica overheard his diagnosis and informs Sookie, who determines she was the one who infected Bill after all. Together, they grapple with the idea of losing Bill forever. New me.
Despite Eric's weakened state, Willis scolds him and demands he release her. He does, and in return, she tells him about Sarah Newlin's sister, Amber, their first lead.
They're on the case.
Sarah Newlin has also been in a form of recovery. Now brunette and living with a guru, she goes by New Me. New Me. But
Aw.
the Yakuza are on
Again?
her trail, and the guru, like most of her partners, is murdered for associating with her. But she escapes.
Clever girl.
Mm.
Eric and Pam find Amber, who is also Hep B positive. It's an epidemic. She tells them Sarah goes to their parents when she's in trouble. So, like you do, they dress up as Republicans and head to a Ted Cruz gala. They find Sarah, but also encounter the Yakuza.
No!
Slippery Sarah escapes again, but Eric and Pam are captured when they again threaten Pam's unlife. A parallel to that day back in France. Turns out the Yakuza, led by a Mr. Gus, wants to team up to get Newland since she ruined their business. Eric agrees as long as he gets to be the one to kill her.
Sarah goes to her sister and reveals that she drank the antidote to Hep B.
What luck!
I mean, seriously. And she heals Amber. When Eric and the Yakuza show up at Amber's door and see she is healed, they learn about Sarah and the game changes. Now they want New Me alive to make new blood and offer Eric a stake in the billion-dollar company if he is their poster boy. They catch up with a hallucinating Sarah and bring her back to Fantasia, but not before Eric partakes of her blood and cures his disease.
Yay!
Love is complicated.
But things are not so rosy and bon ton after all.
Say it isn't so.
No, the scorned Violet resolves to get her revenge on Jason by kidnapping Adeline and Wade, who ran off to be together when Andy and Holly objected to their romance. But when Jessica senses Adeline's fear, she too rushes to their rescue, getting kidnapped herself, all as a trap for Jason.
Hoyt returns to Bon Tom for his mother's funeral with his girlfriend Bridget. Jason is immediately smitten with her, but resolves to be a better friend to Hoyt this time. Hoyt is cold and angry and seems mismatched with Bridget as they fight over him not wanting a family. When Jason receives a texted photo from Violet of Jessica tied up, he rushes off to help, but gets kidnapped also.
Oh, geez, that's a lot of kidnapping for one night.
Luckily, just as Violet's villain monologue reaches its height, Hoyt shows up and shoots her, saving the day, and finds himself strangely intrigued by the red-headed vampire, but can't quite remember.
Sookie and Bill reconcile by recreating their first night together and hashing out old wounds like why he tried to sell her to a vampire queen.
Yes.
Determined to save him, Sookie calls in Dr. Ludwig and her fairy godfather, but to no avail. But when Eric shows up healed, she demands to know how and discovers that Sarah's blood holds the cure. They sneak Bill in the back way to Fantasia to feed from her, only to have him refuse like a suicidal toddler. Ginger's last stand.
Eric fucks Ginger, and it's really good. For one of them. New and old beginnings.
When the Yakuza threatened Pam for the third time, this time with some crazy torture device.
I mean, come on, Pam, get it together.
Yeah! Eric is fed up. They trick the Yakuza and kill them, taking over control of new blood, but diluting it so that vamps will be dependent for life. A blonde again, Sarah Newlin is the poster girl and a black market blood prostitute fetching the highest price. Pam and Eric live on rich and happy, while Sarah lives on, but decidedly not so happy.
When Hoyt and Bridget break up, Jason bonds with Bridget and Jess reconnects with Hoyt.
Wife swap.
Each sharing the truth about what happened between them. Bill embarrassingly asks if Hoyt intends to marry Jessica, who is mortified by his bluntness, but he explains that he only wants to see her provided for before he dies. Jessica wants to give that to him, and she and Hoyt share a small wedding in the Compton living room with all of their friends gathered.
But Bill isn't done asking for favors. He is ready to die and offers that Sookie use her light to end his suffering, claiming it would protect her from danger in the future if she were not so tempting to vampires.
Could be true.
But in the end, she decides to keep her light, atta girl, her specialness. Lying together in his grave, ready to let each other go, she instead stakes him with the broken handle of a shovel. a romance.
4 years later, it's Thanksgiving. And everyone is there. Jason is with Bridget and their kids. Jessica and Hoyt are together. Arlene and Keith have sparked a romance. Sam and Nicole visit from Chicago with their children.
Them too?
Andy and Holly are there with Wade, Rocky, and Adeline. Willa and Letty Mae and Reverend Daniels are reconciled. James and Lafayette are going strong. And finally, a pregnant Sookie leans over to kiss her husband, a man whose face we never see, but who obviously makes her happy.
Brian Buckner, or as we know him, Bucky. He was with True Blood from episode 1 until the very last episode. He was our executive producer and then our showrunner. And in fact, he even wrote the first episode that Kristin was in, episode 104.
And before True Blood, he was a producer and a writer on the Emmy Award-winning Spin City. And on one of the most popular TV shows in history, he was a producer and a writer on Friends and Joey for 89 episods.
89 episodes. That's almost as many episodes as the entirety of True Blood.
Yeah, right.
You're talking 24 a season, but that is an enormous credit, of course. He then went on to produce and write the TV show Related with our very own Lizzie Kaplan and The Class with our very own Lizzie Kaplan. So long history there.
I see a pattern. And since True Blood, he's produced and written Fear of the Walking Dead. He is such a funny, brilliant, thoughtful man. I am so thrilled that he took the time to talk to us. He was such an integral part of True Blood.
Without further ado, Brian Buckner.
Oh my God, Bucky!
Otherwise known as Brian Buckner is here. We're so happy.
No, nobody knows me as Brian Buckner.
Oh my gosh.
I miss you both so much.
I know.
Like, so much.
It's so good to see you.
Yeah.
I have the tissues ready.
She's got her tissues ready. She has to be. I mean, rewatching the show, Bucky, it really did. Like seeing your name pop up and then seeing scenes, because Kristin and I didn't watch. So watching it for the first time, going, oh my gosh, I remember sitting in the director's chairs with Bucky right there, and he made that joke that night, and then it showed up in the scene. Like, having those moments was so exciting.
Having not, I mean, I obviously was super steeped in it, but just rewatching it, like I did it in 2 days, and I would say half. I swear to God, I didn't remember, and it was
so
all
much.
I lived and breathed for that year.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's.
That's a long time ago now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember the choices now. I think I can speak, meaningfully but it's just it was wild, like just whole swaths of it that I mean I remember the big moves,
right.
But
It's a strange feeling when I see a scene like I stayed up late finishing season 7 last night, and I got to the scene with me and Anna Camp on the carousel, and I'm like, I was not in that set. I don't remember filming that. I don't. There's nothing there.
Right?
Like, how is that possible?
Well, also it was probably 4 a.m, so you were delirious to begin with. Yeah.
Thank you. Deb is so sweet.
I do remember that night, but certain things in that scene, I'm like, well, I haven't been vaccinated yet. Like, it's just like, it was just so bizarre.
Crazy.
Yeah,
that was the moment my memory came back, actually, because I remembered choreographing how to move her head and then where the camera would be, and that was
fun. Let's take your memory even further back, from 10 years to 15 or more.
Steer me through
First
this.
of all, we always want to know, how did you get the job? So way back when the show was starting, how were you brought into this writers' team?
Well, I had a sort of unique, my whole background had been comedy for the most part. I had done like one show, because I'd worked on Friends,
a tiny show.
And
yeah.
No, and Marta Kaufman, who created Friends, had brought me on to do like she was like supervising a 1 hour and dramedy, if that's what you want to call it. And so I went back to sitcoms for a hot minute, but then I started to have some I had kids at this point, and sitcom hours were not appealing to me, and I left this show I was working on to write like a hard 1 hour drama without any jokes, right? So that I could get taken seriously as a 1 hour writer. And then of course this Alan Ball and I shared an agent at the time, Sue Nagel, who later became our boss on True Blood, right? And so God bless her, she moved me to the top of the list, when Alan was looking for writers, and she's like, Brian has a sitcom background, and Alan, did too. And for us on the show, it was always about like, how do we bridle this? How you probably remember us going, we recognize that it's a joke, right? We recognize that it's funny, but we're asking you to play straight through it.
Always.
Don't ever leave the scene to get the laugh. Like play it as honestly as you can. But our table reads, I promise you, were funnier than Joey. I promise. But it was, I was listening to your other podcast with Michael Lehman, and it was a comedy. It was absolutely a comedy, but I learned certain tricks, which was like on a sitcom, you land on the joke. On True Blood, we buried it within the line because you didn't need to go get the laugh, right? So I had to learn to sort of invert all this, but the show allowed us to use this whole bag of tricks that, and that at any, in any given, like I didn't even know when I'd sit down to write it, what the value of the scene was going to be. Were we going to be asking you to laugh, to cry, to be horrified, a little of each, and that's what I miss more than anything. And why rewatching the show was traumatic. Because it's like watching Bill die the true death in the end of the season was literally like watching the show die again. And it does.
It does. I have to do Lego simultaneously while I watch for my own insecurities, but also just to kind of like keep myself present, and not just sort of sad about everything. Because I think that's one thing we really love about this podcast is reminding people at home that it's not just a show for all of us. This was a family and a community and a whole group of people that you never saw on screen that we're very close with. And every time someone died or the show ended, we all lost that person or each other a little bit.
At least you two have had this to sort of like keep yourselves connected all these years. I mean, I'm
Big
friends
time.
with a lot of our sort of finishing writing staff, but time goes on, and I think I said it when one of those Cinerama Dome nights. It's like what people don't understand is, I think the fans love this show and they love the behind the scenes parts of it. But for us, it was our every waking hour.
Yes.
And you just become a family with these people.
Yes.
And then the worst part about TV is when it's over, like a lot of those relationships stop.
Yeah.
I know.
And so it's like a loss.
Yeah. And especially, characters are gone forever, right? I can see Stephen Moyer, but I will never see Bill Compton again. I will never speak with him again.
No.
And that's a weird thing to try to explain that loss. But I want to bring up something too. I think this was you. My mother brings it up all the time. It must have been one of the last premieres. And you went up and you said, the first people I want to thank are all of the spouses, right? Like the families, the people at home who were missing all of us while we went and did these long days and these long hours on the weeks on weeks on weeks. And she always said how much she appreciated that perspective and that you had that perspective.
I always likened it to like being on a nuclear submarine.
Yeah.
Like we go down and then they'll see us like 8-9 months later. And as writers on the show, we got to visit the submarine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we would always sort of like supervise our own episodes. You know, the little behind this. But when I took over Alan's role in those final 2 seasons, now I was on the submarine.
Yeah.
Right. Because so I actually really understood what it was. And, you know, I had 2 young kids at that point. This is context. Early on in the show, 2008, I want to say, right? Like that was the first writer's strike, or the first one that I was a part of, right? So writers had to go away, right?
Yes.
and my daughter was born in that window, right? So then I already had a son who's 4 years older than she, but like Sela was born, and then the strike ended. And I had to go to set. So I can mark like all of this by my family. I know what scene we were shooting. We were at Fantasia, episode 4, Kristin.
Yes.
I believe.
Yes.
Okay, which is where you were. Yeah, 104. And I'm sitting in the parking lot, and my wife is freaking out because we have a problem with the nanny, and I'm like, you know, like all of that.
Gosh.
So yes, our families. Had to share us with this show.
It was a beautiful gesture. I think meant a lot to her and to me. You know, even though at the time I didn't have a family in that way. I think it's good to remember that we need support from all angles, and they really loaned us to this show.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious, Bucky, because you said, you know, you wanted different hours than the sitcom hours. And for an actor, the sitcom... Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's you see where I'm going.
Right.
Because for an actor, right, the sitcom hours are the greatest thing in the world. And the 1 hour is tougher, especially a show like this. But so how did that... Like, what's the difference... How did it end up being the difference between writing for Friends and then writing for True Blood? Like... What were the differences there? Because I think you and I really bonded early over our sitcom background. For one, we just always like to riff and laugh at base camp.
Yeah.
How was that different for a writer?
Sitcoms are more like stage plays, right? So it was a process of you have a script, you have a table read, right? But on True Blood, you have a table read, and then ideally, we would hear from you after the table read if there were issues and stuff like that. But there wasn't, if we heard something that didn't work, we'd fix it, right?
Right.
But the sitcom week is very different. It's run-throughs, it's rehearsals,
right?
And the daytime for writers on sitcoms is we're breaking story for next week, right? Then you go to the rehearsal, the run-through. Right?
Yeah.
You hear notes, depending on how loud a voice actors have on sitcoms, which on Friends was loud, right? You'd get their notes, you'd get studio and network notes. You had a run through first for the studio on a Tuesday, and then for the network on a Wednesday. And after every day,
right,
there's a meaningful rewrite, and that doesn't start in earnest until after dinner, right? So we were always there till 2, 3 in the morning. So it is the inverse. The way Alan ran the room on True Blood, and which I did after Alan left, was sort of like I had to be in a whole bunch of places, right? He had to be in a whole bunch of places, but the room, we were real focused. This was before people thought it was acceptable to have their cell phones on, out in front of them, in the room, right?
Right.
We were real focused, but it was 4 or 5 hours of story breaking, and then it would be post, or we have tone and concept meetings, or whatever it was. But like, it was pretty compartmentalized. So the life of us, we writers on True Blood was kind of cush, unless it was. Unless it was our episode, in which case you're in the summer.
But that's kind of fun, though, I imagine. Kind of take a break from the one sort of routine of doing the writing work to then jump on set and see it come to life.
Yeah. But we were all, I don't remember which of the podcasts I was listening to, Kristin, but you were saying like Alan's amazing sort of gift of supervision was let everybody hire people who are good at their jobs and let them do it. Right. So we were very, we got the rope to hang ourselves with real quick. and most of us didn't, but he really did sort of let us go and do the job of running our own episodes.
Yeah.
You know, and working real closely with you guys.
Now talk about that room, because we just interviewed Angela Robinson before, and she talked about, coming in at the end, the rapid fire, gotta jump in there. What is the sort of challenge of that? What's the inspiring part of that in that space? Like, how do you break story with a group of people?
Rewatching this season, it took me back to the room and remembering that. Serialized TV like we did, right? Where it's like, well, and True Blood was like really serialized because we almost always picked up where we left off the previous episode, right? We would do a cliffhanger.
It's been like 2.5 months since the beginning of the series, according to Sookie. Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. And there was a moment in the final season where it's like, Sookie's reading the journal that she finds in the girl's room, who the girl who looked just like her in Saint Elise or whatever that town was called, right? And she's reading it, and it's like, now we have to acknowledge the fact that no time has passed.
Right.
Because if we started in the present and the show is 7 years later, Sookie's going like 2008.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I guess 7.5 months. We had that 6 months. So
Yeah. So time was super compressed, but it meant that like you knew where you had to start your next episode. And that's the main difference between, not just multicam, but like serialized television versus procedural television, right? Where it's like every week you need to come up with a new thing. Like we knew what story we had to tell. In particular, in that final season, we knew the sort of tent poles. It was about navigating between there, and then Angela always had this expression she would use. She's, it was borrowed from the indigenous people, I think, but she said, you got to use the whole buffalo. Yeah. Right. And it was like, you can't leave anything dangling. Like, so all these things we still had to come pick up and cross off. And the weave in that final season was something that I was like, we were pretty cohesive. Like we were, that group was tight. And, sometimes people felt left out, I think, because that season, we had this feeling like that season was ours. The previous season was
figuring it
rocky.
out.
Figuring it out. But that season was like, we're gonna be in lockstep. We're going to, set things up that don't pay off for 4 episodes down the line. We're going to tell a story about gun violence. And that's going to take the first half of the season, and that's okay. Then we're going to talk about the thematics of what is a miracle and free will versus fate, and all these things that I'd forgotten we did until I was watching this yesterday.
There was an interesting commentary when I was reading. They talked about that quoted you, because they said they were a little concerned. There's that whole trip they take to see like Shreveport abandoned, and they were like, oh well, there's no payoff. Like it doesn't advance the story. There's no clue that they find here. Is that okay? And that you had said something that I thought was really brilliant, which is the idea that that's part of the story too. Sometimes it doesn't pay off. Sometimes you go searching and you just are greeted with a dead end, and you have to then deal with that and move on. And, again, what a beautiful way to, include that experience.
Yeah, that's true. But having watched it yesterday, right? It in terms of plot, maybe there's not a payoff. In terms of Sookie's journey,
yes.
There's no doubt, and we were very, part of the reason for the bloodbath of the final season wasn't just about let's be nihilistic and kill everybody, right? It was about, here's a show that started out about humans and vampires, right? And there were maenads and there were witches, and but in order to land the plane, it had to become about humans and vampires again, right? And so we had to tie off Alcide. We had to tie off Sam. We had to, these were things that would never be sort of like expressed until 10 years later. But it was like, if in order for this metaphor to work, in order for Sookie to contemplate giving up my special,
Right.
the thing that makes me special, and Bill to be willing to give up the thing that made him special in order to in order to let Sookie lead an ordinary life, right? Which is, that season, maybe it was because I had kids, but that season was all about family, and from the jump in that episode with in the town, right? Where Andy Belfleur, Chris, says to Jason, a man ain't nothing without a family, right? And then that weighs on Jason, and all of that, if you pull it through, sets up the finale that we did, right? And that was important to us, that final season, to be saying something about what makes being human magical, and that was, for better or for worse, we were definitely trying to say something in the final season of a genre show.
That's beautiful.
So
when it puts those those comments, my mother remembered in a lot of context.
And so many guests have said family. We hear that over and over.
Yeah.
And the last episode is,
you're gonna cry.
Gonna. Past tense.
We love you. Yeah,
I'm already.
Yeah.
I've been fighting it since I saw your face.
Oh, it does do that to people.
See, you're funny.
It's the humor.
Oh my God. Well, I have so many things to say, but I'll start with Anna Paquin, because the episode is called Thank You. And in an interview, you said that that was for the fans, but also for Anna, because she just no matter what was handed her, that girl working those hours, #1 on the call sheet, I don't know how many forced calls she had, she knocked it out of the park every single day. And that scene where Bill dies, oh my God, I was a mess.
I was too. I mean, I ending Bill was a big deal, and it didn't feel good, right? And we talked about it, and we talked about it, and the rehearsal was heavy, like it was really heavy, and I fucking love them, like I love them, and I didn't want to kill him. That said, I didn't know a better ending for the show. You start with a self-hating vampire, right?
Right.
Who is poison for this person, despite their love, right? Is poison for her. And he basically says to her, you're going to return to this poison. It's not different than Letty Mae's addiction. Like they were drawn to each other, like a moth to the flame, he says, right? So, especially after Billith.
Right.
There was no other way to let Bill die a hero,
right,
than if he made the ultimate sacrifice. There just wasn't another way, and I didn't know. We didn't know how else to come at it. Other than to, and I watched it again today, and in genre, you're always managing the audience's expectations, the tropes of the genre, and then your space as a creative to juggle and shuffle the deck of those tropes. And so it
right.
It was at times not the most favorably reviewed finale or anything like that, but I watched it again today, and I'm like, I don't know what other choice I would make. I remember being asked that, it was the day after.
Wow.
The day after the finale, and they're basically asking me this question about why did Bill have to give up what he was, but for me, it was his choice. But like you have, you're dealing with this theme of the other.
Yes.
We had vampires. We had, shapeshifters, werewolves, panthers. It's a fucking insane show.
Yeah.
Where we went.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I can't believe we were allowed to do it. Like I can't believe it
either.
Yeah. And it's all because Alan had carved out this relationship of trust with this network. And by the time, it was like, then we borrowed the trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you couldn't make it today.
No.
And a lot of people say they want it. Like, we want another True Blood. And then you pitch it to them and they're like, that seems sort of random. We don't understand this mashup. What do you mean? What do you mean trust you? What do you mean, like which category does it go in?
It has to come from their side as well in order to be that bold.
And when everything is data driven and they think the data is predictive of something and there's the level of accountability there is now and greenlighting things, I think it's become real hard to say, when you go and pitch a show now, they want to know what all 5 seasons are.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Right? Like you're pitching a movie, but it's the whole thing.
Wow.
The fun of TV is, Deborah, your character wasn't in the books.
Yeah.
Right.
I wouldn't be on this show if that was the case.
Your character wasn't in the books. And in the book, because it's a book and it's not responsible for where's Bill, right?
Right.
He dropped out of the end of that book, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so we were stuck in the room saying, well, it's a TV show. We can't just not have our male lead, right? Like gone from the show for these last 2 hours. So what punishment is there?
Right.
What would be the worst thing you could do to Bill, who's a self-hating vampire, is to force him to make a vampire, right? So, but even when we did it, it was like, okay, well, this is episode, was it 8 or 9 or, it was a 12-episode season, 10. But even when we did it, it wasn't like, oh, Jessica Hamby's going to be part of the show from now on. But I remember, I didn't write the episode.
No.
I remember being out there that night, though. I was on set for Nancy, maybe?
Chris Offutt wrote the making,
that
and
makes
then
sense.
Nancy wrote the next episode, the Waking Up.
I was out there, and I watched you work, and I heard you in a podcast talking about Nelson, trembling and how exhausting it was.
Yeah.
You were so thoroughly exhausted and so brilliant in the van driving back to base camp afterwards.
Yeah.
And I was like, I now have to go in tomorrow and convince everybody that Jessica's part of the show. Like, but and then it's like once everybody saw the dailies, it was like, yeah, of course, right? But like that's the fun of TV is the exploration and you kind of I'm comfortable when you go and pitch a show with telling people where I think it ends. Because the show has a through line and ideally a long arc, and but to be asked to account for everything in the middle is nearly impossible, and it wouldn't allow for that.
I agree. Some of the most brilliant parts, which is, recognizing not only that you have opportunities in someone like Nelson, right, to then expand this character, but also to start learning where actors' strengths are, what writers' strengths are, and be able to write towards things so that you get a better, you really get the best out of everyone. And if you're, stuck in a corner, written into a corner based before that.
But here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Nelson, of course, right? But Jason, right? Like it's the only line I can draw from Friends to True Blood, right?
Yeah.
Like Matt LeBlanc, Ryan Quanten, right? They're both. It's first of all really hard to play dumb.
Yes,
because you have to make really, really smart choices.
Yes.
Like throughout, you have to make smart choices
and pull them off.
Yes.
And pull them off. But the mistake that people make, like you have to understand how they got there, like so I remember reading Alan. Alan wrote the first 3 scripts, before we writers came in and started pitching in, right?
Yeah.
I remember not understanding Jason on the page.
Wow.
Like really genuinely not getting it. Like what the tone was. I mean, Alan directed the pilot, right? And that was helpful. But Ryan navigating himself through, like Jason being questioned about a murder that he doesn't think he committed, but might have committed.
Right.
Like, there's no way I could ever have navigated my way through that. But here's the point I'm trying to make. When you shoot a pilot, right? You cast your pilot, and then you've written whatever you've written, and nowadays you have to like have a Bible. You've already like told everybody what the whole series is.
Right.
I feel like none of it matters. When you sit down at that first table read with your cast and you hear what they're doing, the choices they're making, their voice, your job as the writer is to figure out everybody's strength and write to it as quickly as possible. You know? And so, you know, on Friends, and this wasn't my observation, but I was there in a assistant capacity in the first season. Like, Chandler didn't become Chandler until Matthew came in and you know, found that cadence. And like, and then it's like, okay, well, this is the character now. And so, you know, that's what TV is supposed to allow, is for us to get to know each other, right?
Yes.
And me to study you. And you to get to know me. But like, you know, that time on set is invaluable. Just sort of because, you know, it's not to say that you're not actors, right? Of course you're actors. But there's some of you in Jessica. There's some of you in Pam. Like there's no way there's not. And so for us to get to know you and listen, and then you help us find the character, like that's,
and hopefully we inspire
huge.
Something in
Of
you
course.
to write, you know, and we're inspired by what you write. No, my side comes from, in order for that to happen, which is again the ultimate ideal experience, is that you are back and forth volleying with a writer and creating this character together. You have to be. There have to be table reads. You have to be supervising your own episodes, and that isn't happening anymore. And so I sigh.
And that's true. And the sad part about this new model is we have to write that whole first season before we get to meet you.
Yeah.
So
And it's going to get shot out of order, and you don't like you know. So that relationship, I think, is near impossible now.
Wow.
And do you feel like, because I think every actor we've had on has commented on how unique that was on True Blood. So was it unique at the time, especially because of Alan and HBO at that time? And that's just as time has gone by with streaming and networks buying each other, so there's like one network now. Has that right? But was it unique to True Blood at the time, even though that has gone extinct, it seems?
I don't know. We started True Blood like on the precipice of this dialogue that now happens between fans and creatives, right?
Yes.
And I was always of the mind that it's a destructive back and forth, you know? You know, and certainly when we did Friends, like there was none of it, right? Like, because it was long before chat rooms and right? Like but I always thought, like, you know, when people would bring into the room, here's what the chat rooms are saying. I was like, let's not, no. Let's not talk about it in here. Let's make the choices we're gonna make. But it you know how technology goes, right? So you know, but part of, I think, what's happening now is the fourth wall is broken, you know, and listen, data is maybe the enemy of creativity. Right? And this may be very, very dangerous to talk about, but I think that decisions being made because they think they know what audiences want to see. And even if someone were brave enough to greenlight something that didn't, you know, pair well against the graph of what the like, it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous to say yes to something that isn't backed by data, because they'll say, how did you make this decision?
It is insane, because the crazy thing is then the very few times that it that something is greenlit, that is different and is challenging, those are the big explosive hit shows. And then they go, okay, I want another show like that. You know, and you're like, oh, you didn't learn from the last one.
Except we all just sort of, I mean, I didn't watch it but I know what won the Emmys, right? And it's all those shows, right?
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's saying, don't pitch the bear. Don't pitch, you know, like right. You know, and certainly don't pitch Succession.
Right.
And don't, you know, like, you know, it's too expensive. It's,
right.
you know, like for all these reasons, it's like the marketplace is so afraid of taking risk that I don't know how you could ever get away with a show that, you know, that crossed the line as often as we did, and that refused to be any one thing. Yeah, you know.
But I agree. You know, art isn't about necessarily succeeding or doing the absolute ultimate. It's about practicing and experimenting and throwing something out there and seeing how it feels to watch it, to experience, to live in it. It is this breathable form, and we forget that when it is coupled too harshly with entertainment, I think, in some ways. And we've, in my opinion, we've given up the controlling rights of art away from the hands of artists. And it used to be that people who made decisions about art were also the artists. And that's because we have dedicated our lives to telling stories, and telling stories that say something dangerous about our times, or something funny or scary about our times. And that we are good at that. And
that
so
say something. You know, it's just so crazy to me that we live in a time that could not be more divisive, right? And yet we want to have TV shows that, like, and which is not to say that I don't think you need eyeballs, because this is commerce at the end of the day, right? But like, why would you try to say nothing?
Right.
You know,
Right.
I don't understand that. And it feels like everything is supposed to say nothing.
That's so well put.
And just sort of be aspirational or feel good. And boy, did we laugh on our show, but it didn't always feel good.
No.
You know, I don't know. You know, so I have been looking for, you know, someone to let me in for the right piece, whether it's IP or, you know, it's like, I'm still probably in the middle of what is already a 10-year search to find something that replaces this in my heart.
Well, I have along those lines, and I don't really understand it at all, but I have such a bee in my bonnet that Anna, like when I watched that scene in season 7, I'm like, she should have actually won an Oscar, not just an Emmy.
Yeah.
And I don't know where we kind of just fell into that gully before genre shows the actors got love for the intensely hard work that they did. It's a little confusing to me.
My honest to God feeling is we jumped the shark when Bill became Billith, and we feel like we creatively corrected, you know, and I don't think the audience ever quite or you know,
came back.
The business ever was willing to go, because you know, and God, I wish I never fucking paid attention to it, and I never read anything before I started show running, but I did, you know, when I did.
It's so hard.
And some people got it, like what we were trying to do, and course correct it, and others were like, that show, I was done, you know. I think it was that, you know, I think if we were ever going to win awards, if Anna was ever going to win awards like that, it would have been earlier in our run. But I don't know that we were really slow and deliberate about revealing the secrets that the books revealed, right?
Right.
You know, it took a lot longer for Anna to find out what she was, for Sookie to find out what she was, right? Than it would if we were making this show today. Right?
Right.
Like, because they'd want those answers. You know, Sookie finding out she's Faye took, what, 3 seasons? Right? And that's why I think the show still had something left to give. And it wasn't just, okay, who's our big bad this season? Because we had a long arc, right? So when I do pitch shows now, I still talk about season to season, how does it operate? Because they need to know, right? But I also talk about the long arc, right? And I'm not sure her part got as meaty as it was in the end until later. You know, her arc from like virginal little girl to woman who makes this choice that she makes in the end, and maybe we were a little bit like precious with like, it's our last season, so we need to, every scene's a goodbye. Everything needs to have meaning. Like as I watch it, I'm like, did we milk it a little? I don't know, maybe.
But you're feeling it, right? Like also that's part of your experience and the heart that you're putting in. And I think that's part of being an artist.
That heart coming back, from I would say season 6 when we had Terry's funeral, and we made a very, very concerted, like, you audience may not have ever really cared about everybody, but before this is over, you're gonna. Like this has been a show about a town, and you're going to love everybody. You're gonna mourn everybody who goes, and we're gonna stop and care because a great man has died.
That is an extraordinary episode, Bucky.
So we were pretty purposeful about what we were trying to do. I don't know if everybody was sort of following the long arc of what we were trying to.
I mean, it's always a tricky one. I look now at like, Barry and the Bear. I mean, they're all in the comedy category, right? Like it's satire, which is what I think True Blood was on a lot of levels, is a hard thing to categorize. And I can see where you might go, well, this doesn't compete in the drama category and it can't be a comedy, so I can see where you would have trouble placing it when it comes to something like traditional awards for what I think is a pretty non-traditional show. So I think that's some of it. I think also, as we all know, awards are not necessarily all content and achievement based.
It felt to me like the first season, Anna won a Golden Globe, that there was, they knew that Alan Ball was the person to look to for serious meaty content. And then the show got so huge that then it was like, oh, genre shows that are huge, we don't give awards to. And then with Game of Thrones, they were like, or maybe we do. So that's what it looked like from the outside.
Yeah, I think like it was great. It was great for the show, I'm sure, and I'm sure for the numbers but like, the Rolling Stone cover, we just became the sexy naked show, right? And it was hard. I think it became high. Anna used to call it that. This is the sexy naked show, right? Like, so it was hard to. I think it became hard to look past it, But I liked it. I liked watching it again.
At the end of the day, we worked on it as if it was an award-winning high, hard-hitting show. And I think that's what matters. If anything, we got the money for the sexy naked show to make our hard-hitting award type show that we wanted to make. So
there wasn't a single person on our show, and I will credit Anna and Steven, I feel like were, like if they were going to work that hard. Right? Then everybody else had to. And they Bill was Steven. Steven was show daddy. Like Steve, like
particularly
like
to me.
But he really was. And they set that sort of like, we don't spend any time with our family, so let's be a family, here. Like I feel that came from number 1 and 2 on the call sheets. So
it absolutely did. I mean, she was the first one on the set. The camera never waited for her, and she didn't complain ever, and she had reason to. I mean, yeah, she was really, and I remember, I kind of really enjoy complaining, and if she overheard me, but
in a very amusing way.
Oh, thank you, Bucky.
I say that because I like to think I complain amusingly too.
You do.
Yeah.
And it's probably why we enjoyed each other so much.
We did.
And I would also like to say, well, I'll finish that, I guess, but like she would turn to me and say, no complaining. And I would go, and I'd go over to Alex and whisper, I need to complain, Daddy. And he'd go, complain, honey. And I'd go, I'm cold. And he'd say, I know. So, but also, I think it was season 6 or 7. It had to be, because I would go to the writer. Pam always had this incredible dialogue that I was just this gold, this Christmas present that came every episode. And I would go to the writer and say, thank you. Oh my God, is that going to get to air? Gash in a sundress, is that going to air? And then
Republicant?
Do I get to say this? And when I would go to that writer, season 6 and 7, very often they would say, oh, that was a Bucky polish. So
Republican, I can tell you was not.
Craig.
Yeah, it was Craig.
Yeah,
it was Craig. That's nice of them. But by that final season, I had everybody's voices so clear in my head that it was typing. It wasn't even writing anymore. Like I could do it in a weekend. I could write an episode in a weekend. I can't tell you how long I spend on scripts that I'm like inventing.
Wow.
Now.
Yeah.
It's pulling teeth, right?
Yeah.
The voices aren't clear, and then this goes back to what parasympathetic relationship or whatever, like what we learn from each other.
Yeah.
Like True Blood always had to be a summer show. Like, we didn't have that thing that other HBO shows have enjoyed, which is like part of our popularity was we were driving the summer, right?
Yeah.
But we just didn't have the luxury, so we were just in a real compressed time frame a lot of the time, and by any show by the end of the season. But it was just such a I don't mean to sound like a douchey artist type, but it was like a gift to be able to hear everybody so clearly, because all I had to do was sit and the show came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it ain't like that now.
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Well, Bucky, thank you so much for coming and chatting to us.
Thank you.
Wrap up our conversations here with Kristin's epitaph here, or epilogue, I should say.
This is a question everyone gets asked. When you think of the show, your experience with the show, are there 3 words that could come to mind?
How about everything all in?
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a writer right there.
That's a writer.
Rewrite the rules of the.
No, we got to use the whole bag.
Yeah.
Like the whole bag. Anything I ever learned about writing and comedy and drama, we got to do everything.
Yeah.
And boy, is that a rare,
Yes.
Yeah.
It was
But,
a thing. It was a moment, and we were all there, and you were captaining the ship.
And you guided us home for the last one, and really home. I love that last episode is called Thank You, which feels like the only title the final episode of True Blood could ever have.
That was not a cheap
No,
usage.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
I got to say,
but it was a thank you. Like, that was
thank you, gratitude.
Yeah.
Those are words we hear over and over and over again about people's experience on the show. So I hear you when you say that is not lightly.
Well, I miss and I love you both.
We love you.
Yeah. Oh, man. I think for me, Deb.
Yeah.
I think maybe Alex and then Bucky are like the most taking me back.
Yeah.
Connected.
Yeah.
Bucky was so central to my True Blood experience.
I don't know that I really fully gathered that before this, but yes, hearing you talk about bonding over your past work experience and what that meant to you. Bucky was always one of the most fun writers to have on set.
So fun.
On his episodes. And then, when he took over as showrunner in those last few years, definitely feeling like, okay, one of the, original, founding parents of this show is going to guide us through. And it's fascinating to hear the pressures on him at that time.
I can only imagine. It's just so brutal.
So much. And you have to make decisions, right? And at the time, you hope that they're the best ones to make. And people are going to have a lot of different opinions about that. But I don't know. I really respect him. And the really believe that he was doing the absolute best for the show in his mind at that time, and I'm grateful to him for that.
Yeah, me too. And I know all the writers had my back. Yeah, and all the cast.
Even when we disagree, right? We all
even
disagree.
when we disagree. But for some reason, I have this visceral experience of Bucky having my back the entire 7 seasons, and even passing him on the way to set or what have you. Just the little jokes and laughing. He's a real emotional connection for me to this show.
That's beautiful.
So it's really incredible to hear. I'd never heard what he said today.
Wow. Yeah.
Next week on Truest Blood, we welcome Greg Daniel on the show, portraying one of the most beloved guest characters for several seasons, Reverend Daniels. Greg got the True Blood promotion he deserved and joined the cast as a series regular in the final season.
Yes, Greg is a prolific artist. We're talking theater, film, TV, acting, directing, teaching. He can and does do it all. Our conversation is a masterclass. Do not miss it. Thanks for listening, Troupies. Subscribe and follow wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll see you next week.
Y'all come back now. You hear?
Truest Blood is produced by Safe Haven for HBO. Executive producers are Janina Gavankar, Kristin Bauer, and Deborah Ann Wool. Our producer is Gabrielle Gallon, and our audio producer is Christopher Wool. Our theme song was recorded just for this podcast by Jace Everett. Additional music was composed by Timo Chen. And remember, you can watch all of the original episodes of True Blood on Max.